So now let's dig a little deeper into paleo diets. So the claims are, this came from a paleo website, when people start eating paleo, they often lose weight, feel less hungry, and have fewer cravings for sugar. Their skin clears up, they have more energy, and they find that muscles start appearing where they had been flabbed for years. This way of eating can literally reverse diabetes, reduce your chances of getting cancer, and reduce inflammation in your joints. It can help you avoid heart disease. The theory, of course, is what humans ate in pre-agricultural times is really what's best suited to our genetic makeup. And as with other animals, the diet we would eat in the wild is really the diet we were intended to eat. And so, what we know is that our native diet supported early humans through a 2 to 4 decade life. People lived an average of 20 to 40 years. Regardless of that, let's assume that it is a good idea to eat like our ancestors. What's the first question you would want to ask? What did our ancestors eat? Right? That's the first question we need to ask. Pre-agricultural people ate wild plants, animals, fish, and insects. The balance of those foods varied with the time frame during the Paleolithic period, with the location on the planet these people were at, with the season, with gathering and hunting skills, with tools and culture. And there were changes over time. During the first 80% of the Paleolithic period, humans were vegetarian because we didn't have any ability to hunt. We might have eaten some insects, but that was about it. During the last 20 years, humans started to hunt. And so some meat was added to the diet. So what didn't people in the Paleolithic period eat? Well, they didn't eat any packaged foods. There was nothing from a box or a bag. There were no deep-fried foods. There were no fast foods. There were no refined fats, oil, sugar, or salt. There was no, or added salt, I should say. There was no milk of other mammals or products that were made from the milk of other mammals. There was certainly no bacon, ham, salami, sausage, or any other processed meat, and there was no alcohol. So do new paleo diets equal true Paleolithic diets? And this is a question I asked myself, and I'll tell you what really got me interested in looking at this question. I went to the nutritional anthropology research, and I found 2 studies, one from 1997 and one from 2010. And these studies are the best studies we have that estimate the intakes of Paleolithic man. So they did the first study in 97, and then 25 years later, their second study came out. And basically what they said is early ancestral diets were overwhelmingly plant-based with some insects and very small amounts of animal flesh. Reliance on meat increased in later ancestral diets as hunting skills improved. However, much proof points to continued significant, if not predominant, dependence on plant foods. So here we have, this is the DRIs, or this is our recommended intake for macronutrients. This is the Paleolithic estimates of what people actually ate in Paleolithic times from 97. And this is their revised estimates from 2010. And so what we know is people probably ate about 3,000 calories. They got close to 30% of their calories from protein. And this is the later part of the Paleolithic, that last 20% of the Paleolithic period. Carbohydrates range from probably about 35 to 65% of calories. 35% for the hunters very far north who had limited plants, 65% for people closer to the equator. Fat ranged from probably 20 to 35% of calories. Saturated fat, somewhere 6 to 12% of calories, depending on how much meat they were having. Cholesterol around the 500 milligrams. Omega-6 to omega-3 around the 2 to 1, and fiber around the 100 to 100, around 70 to 150 grams. So when you look at all of that, is there anything there that just pops out at the page at you? The fiber, it's absolutely crazy. 104, that was the original estimate. And then they increased the range from 70 for the hunters way far north to 150 to 200 in the people near the equator. So where does fiber come from? Plants, exactly. So when I saw this, I thought to myself, holy smokes, these people were eating a truckload of plants. So I don't see people eating a paleo, so-called paleo diet today that are eating anywhere close to 70 to 150 grams of fiber. Even vegans don't eat, often, they might get 70 if they're eating a really good vegan diet, but even most vegans don't get that. So then I looked at the micronutrients, and again, the estimates really were shocking. So vitamin C to 500 to 600 milligrams. Most vegans probably get 200 or 300. Where does vitamin C come from? Yeah, fruits, vegetables, exactly. That's where vitamin C comes from. What about calcium? 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams. They weren't drinking any milk. Where did they get their calcium? Leafy greens, plants. Potassium, 7,000 to 10,000 milligrams. What's the recommended intake of potassium? 4,700. Does anybody meet it? Probably 95% of the population doesn't get that much potassium. And vegans do the best, but even vegans often don't get the 4,700. These guys were eating close to 10,000. Where does potassium come from? Plants, right? So then I thought to myself, I wonder what is closer to a true Paleolithic diet, a paleo diet or a vegan diet. So I thought, I'm just going to do some math here. So I went to a paleo, probably the most popular paleo website, and took 3 days of recommended menus and analyzed them to see what they were actually eating. And then I did the same with a recommended plant-based menu, which is 100% plant-based or vegan. And then I compared the amount of nutrients, this is the macronutrients in the true paleo diet, with those of what people who are calling themselves paleo are actually eating, with those people on a plant-based diet were eating. To look at, I wonder what comes closer, the vegan diet or the 100% plant-based, or this thing they call a paleo diet. And here's what I found out. And of course, when I did the analysis, I adjusted the menus so they all provided the same number of calories. So it was a fair comparison. So they all provided 3,000 calories. So the protein was actually closer on the new paleo diet, about 30%, 32% of calories on this, what they call the paleo diet. Very close, whereas a vegan diet's only about 15%. But carbohydrates were much closer on the plant-based diet. Fat was closer on the plant-based diet. Saturated fat was closer on the plant-based diet. Cholesterol was closer on the new paleo diet. The ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 was actually closer on the plant-based diet. And of course, the fiber intake was closer on the plant-based diet. And you see the 31 grams of fiber in the new paleo diet, but that's at 3,000 calories. So at 2,000 calories, like most people would be eating, they might get 20 if they're doing a good diet. So then let's look at the micronutrients. Who comes closer? Well, for riboflavin, thiamine, vitamin C, and E, the plant-based diet came closer. Vitamin A and zinc, the paleo diet came closer. Iron, calcium, sodium, and potassium, the plant-based diet came closer. And here's the summary. The paleo diet comes closer to a true Paleolithic diet for 4 nutrients: protein, cholesterol, zinc, and vitamin A. The plant-based diet comes closer to a true Paleolithic diet for 13 nutrients. And you can see them listed there. In other words, a plant-based, 100% plant-based diet is actually nutritionally closer to a true Paleolithic diet than what people are calling a Paleolithic diet or a paleo diet today. So why the macronutrient discrepancies? If you think to yourself, the paleo people are eating meat, and plants like vegetables. And that's what people ate in Paleolithic times. Why aren't the numbers matching better for nutrient intakes? Well, let's look at what the differences were. First of all, total fat, they eat twice as much fat as people during the Paleolithic period. They eat 2 to 3 times more saturated fat and 2.5 times more cholesterol. They eat only about 1/4 to 1/2 the carbohydrates, and they eat only about 1/3 of the fiber. So what's going on? Well, why the discrepancy? Well, the paleo today, the people trying to do paleo, are focused on achieving the protein intakes of the Paleolithic period, 30% protein. That's what their focus is, getting that protein. They're less concerned about getting the same amount of fiber or vitamin C or potassium as people during the Paleolithic period did. So their emphasis is on meat as opposed to plant foods. And we have to recognize that wild foods do not equal farmed foods. Meat and vegetables consumed today were not available in Paleolithic times, and they bear little resemblance to those eaten by pre-agricultural populations. If we compare wild meat to domestic meat, what we see is meat from wild animals is much lower in fat, about 6 to 16% of calories from fat, compared to 30 to 60% of calories from fat in farmed animals. It was much lower in saturated fat, higher in omega-3s. It was free of antibiotics, of added hormones, and in Paleolithic times, of environmental contaminants. And even the wild versus domestic plants, cultivated vegetables and fruits have been bred for appearance, palatability, transportability, digestibility, and yield. Wild plants deliver over 3 times the fiber of commercial plants and are more concentrated in vitamins and minerals and protein. So there were big differences. So the paleo diet of today does not equal the true Paleolithic diet.